Let's now move on to the second part. So let's differentiate between efficiency and effectiveness. It's always interesting to see how these two terms are used often interchangeably, but it's good to understand, in particular, when we talk more about financial kind of language and when we address marketing. So, following the instructions, kind of being productive at doing what you do, is efficiency. And being in your direction or going where you really need to go, doing things that really matter, is effectiveness. So, efficiency is really about doing things right. It's about being productive. It's a productivity measure or barometer. Whereas effectiveness is doing the right things. Sometimes I use an example which is not marketing related, saying, I remember when I was doing my PhD, and there were moments when I had to kind of really work hard and revise a lot of literature and so on. And instead, I would start cleaning my house and every single corner in the house, and everything would look brilliant, crystal clear. So I was doing things right. I was being efficient. However, I was not doing the right things because the right thing for me to do back then was to perhaps focus on my PhD. If you want an example for marketing, say in terms of efficiency, you might be very good at creating maybe brand awareness, perhaps. So your brand awareness metric might shoot up and really show good results. However, say your objectives were to really increase the market share or to get more sales, so that would be doing the right things. So what if you increase brand awareness, for example, but your goal was really to drive sales, increase market share, so you were not maybe doing the right things. So that's the difference. And when we use different metrics, when it comes to efficiency, we're really looking how well we were doing things, and when it comes to effectiveness, we were looking whether we were doing the right things. So hopefully this clarifies. Now, interesting, how much do companies spend, or shall I use a word invest, on marketing? In fact, there is more recognition recently that marketing should be treated as an investment rather than as a cost. So this is the data for 2014. Just today I tried to look for the data for 2017, and unfortunately I was not able to find this data for all of the companies. So let's start with Apple. What we are saying is that Apple is spending around 1.27%. What does it mean? So if you look into the accrued marketing and selling expenses, so this was 2,321 million. So that would be 2 billion. And if you divide it by the net sales, which was 182 billion, you would come to a figure 1.27%. So it's kind of quite common to express the marketing spend or marketing investment as a percentage when you're comparing marketing costs with revenues, or marketing costs with sales or with turnover, and so on. So Samsung, as an example, they spend 5.6%, and that's when we are comparing sales promotion, advertising and sales promotion to net sales. When we look at BMW, so you can see that they are spending 6.6%, Barclays a little bit more, than Facebook, which was around 13.5%. So as I was saying, Facebook is spending around 13.5% and Unilever nearly 15%. So I've tried to have a look at the data, at the most recent data, and guess what? With Apple, it's a slightly different situation, and we will talk about this a little bit later, but they did not disclose the marketing expenses. So also Samsung, you couldn't find the expenses as well. So I looked BMW, the situation remained pretty much similar. So they did increase their marketing spend, However, their revenues have increased as well. So the new figure is 6.25%. And you derive this when you are basically taking selling expenses and dividing it by the revenues. I also looked up Facebook, and their revenue has actually increased. It more than doubled. It was in 2016, it was 27 billion, so almost 28. And the marketing and sales expenses were basically 13.65%. And that was 2016. And when I was talking about BMW, it was for 2017. So you are more than welcome to go and explore the financial reporting, just annual reports, Google it, and you should be able to find it. So some companies call it marketing expenses, others say marketing and sales, public relations, advertising, and so forth. But usually they go under the item of operational expenses. Okay, let's move on. So, Apple case. What's so interesting about Apple? You can see in this graph very interesting information. So it shows advertising expense and as a percent of revenue. So you can see up until 2015. And what can you see here? Advertising expense in green or yellow color. You can see how they were increasing every year until it reached 1.8 billion in 2015, and percentage of revenues. So you can also see what was the percentage of revenues, which is around kind of 1%. So, in fact, the interesting thing is that Apple stopped disclosing how much it spends on ads. So, you can't find this information for 2016, 17. And the decision not to disclose ad spend for the full year 2016 comes a year after Apple's ad expenses rose by 50%. You can see to a record of 1.8 billion. Because in 2014 it was roughly 1.2 billion. So logic would perhaps dictate that Apple's spend hit another record high in 2016, and because it was spending more on ad cost per sale, the company decided it might look just slightly better if they were not to disclose their marketing expenses. We will talk about this a little bit later, but based on the law, for example, in the UK and in other countries in the world, companies may choose not to disclose their marketing expenses. However, what they have to do is they have to be consistent from year to year so you can compare the figures. Also, Apple ended 2016 with its lowest operating margin since 2009, which could be part due to spending more advertising dollars to drive total revenue growth. So that might be another reason why they didn't want to disclose their marketing expenses. Yes, you can see, for example, for 2017 data. Just a moment. For 2017, you can see, for example, here, they show operating expenses, selling, general, and administrative expenses. And they say the marketing and expenses go right here. So you can't see the split, the breakdown, but you can tell that percentage of total sales. So we would say 7% of selling, general, and administrative expenses. So 7% of total net sales would go on selling, general, and admin expenses. What are companies doing today? Unilever is a great example, and they started adopting zero-based budgeting. The question is really sometimes asked by critics, is it critical to growth, or is it simply a distraction and just kind of a new method just to kind of almost like complicate your job? The idea is that every year, what companies used to do previously, they would say, that's how much money we spent on marketing last year, say 5% of our revenues, and this should be our starting point for the new year. So Unilever tried to challenge this and say, no, that's not right. We should start always with zero budgeting, and you should tell us as a marketeer, what do you want money for? How much do you want? And why do you want that much? So they are not saying that they are cutting on marketing budget, not at all. It's just a different approach and different mindset to look into marketing. And that's when you look through the perspective of trying and always proving the value. So, as I mentioned, it's not a cost-cutting method or belt-tightening approach. It's just kind of perhaps better, more strategic way to plan your marketing resources. And interestingly, what Unilever, Procter & Gamble does, a lot of FMCG companies are trying kind of to copy some of their approaches and apply the same in their practices. And also information, there is more research showing that Unilever, Mondelez, and Procter & Gamble are actually trying to move away from promotional spending, and instead they are looking at other parts of the marketing mix to stronger communicate brand benefits. So instead of spending money on promoting promotional messages and actually losing money from selling products cheaper, it's more about communicating the product benefits. And if customers believe in the benefits, they would buy a product. So are the companies measuring marketing performance? At the very start, I showed you the data, and there is an American company called Lensgold. They actually did a research, and they asked companies around the world, a lot of them are Americans, but companies from Europe, Asia, and other regions, does your firm calculate marketing profitability, return on investment, or a similar financial measure to assess marketing effectiveness? So 38% of the companies said, yes, we calculate return on investment, net present value, or other for at least some of our marketing campaigns. Somewhat, we calculate some financial metrics, reported by 39%, and no, we use traditional marketing, but not financial. So this company has actually noticed that the situation was improving. Every year there were more and more companies doing that. However, again, it says for at least some of marketing efforts, 38% of the companies that are doing so. So it doesn't really mean that they are doing it for all marketing and whether this is the good approach. However, the trend is very clear. More and more companies are going that direction. Just to remind you, again, showing you Kumar's paper appearing in 4-Star Marketing Journal, where he was looking into evolution of marketing thought and practice. So as of 96 up until today, there is so much focus on actually measuring marketing performance. You can see 96 to 2004, it's about resource allocation efforts. So it's about marketing optimization, how much money you put and where. And 2005, 2012, we started talking about marketing accountability. And from as of 2013, it's marketing is at the core of the organization. And you can see just here on the right hand side, which are triggers for the themes, focus on marketing efficiency and effectiveness. So theory and practice go hand in hand. theory says that there is a lot of focus on measuring marketing performance, so does the practice from various different research sources that I have demonstrated. Therefore, the pressure is as high as it ever was.